Hi, I'm Dawn Cavanaugh, APQS Education Director. Over the past year, several students have come back to Iowa to take classes here at our National Training Center in Des Moines, and several have asked me to show them how the border is quilted on the quilt behind me. It's a quilt that my mother-in-law actually pieced for me clear back in 2002 as part of a program where the teachers were actually required to enter a quilt that they had put together in a show that we were teaching at, and then I quilted it. The quilting is done with sunflowers, but the border is a little bit unique. It's slightly different in that the S-curves only touch the perimeter border, not necessarily following along a line that's already been stitched. Let me show you what the border looks like up close. We're going to draw some on the whiteboard and then hopefully stitch some out on a quilting machine. As I zoom in a little bit on the navy border here on this particular quilt, you'll notice that I used a heavy variegated thread. That variegated thread does help set off the curves that are created by the design itself. As we scan down a little bit, you'll notice that each one of the S-curve shapes does not necessarily follow along the line of a previous shape. Instead, strategic points are used to create the texture and dimension that fills in the border. I personally turn most of my quilts to do my side borders, and that's going to be shown in another episode here on the APQS Quilting channel. But for the purposes of this video, I wanted you to take a look at how I actually worked towards the inner border, where you had to deal with meeting a seam line. And then I'll back out a little bit so you can take a look at how the particular border looks overall. So as you can see, the dimension created by the variegated thread has a powerful effect, and the S-curves create a lot of movement and interest all along the border of that quilt. So let's move to a whiteboard. I'll do a little bit of the drawing and then we'll try to stitch them out for you. I'm going to bounce around with some curves, branch out to a new area, and I'm going to touch one of the existing curves already. I'm going to continue branching out back and forth, bouncing around, touching a new spot. Don't worry about the number of lines or repeats that you put in it. Simply relax and let your mind wander. That's what will create a very beautiful, organic type of fill. Try to vary the angle. If you run into a space where you've left yourself very little room, as long as you continue with a shape that is consistent with what you're doing, there I just bounced around with some tiny curves. That helps me to get out of that little trapped area and continue filling in. Remember, as soon as you start freehand quilting, you're going to end up creating rules for yourself that you didn't even know you had created. If you tell yourself, oh, I always must have 3 or 4 lines in one direction, you just made up a rule for yourself, something that you feel obligated to follow. However, if you say it's okay if I branch off in different directions, you also created another rule for yourself, but this time gave yourself more freedom. Allow yourself the chance to play. Don't worry about everything being precise. By the time you're done, you're going to have a very beautiful background fill. I can keep my hands out of the way and you can actually see the quilting machine go to work. I've put in a bright red thread to hopefully show up for you on the camera. I'm going to turn on the stitch regulator on this APQS Millennium, and let's get started. noticed I moved a little bit out of camera range there, but hopefully you can get an idea of how that might develop, especially if you're using a thread that blends a little bit more and don't have a camera actually between your arms as you're trying to videotape it for somebody else. But take a look at where you see a little bit of extra thread build up here. If I didn't have the camera right between me and the machine, I'd be able to be a little more accurate in there. The goal is just to create some nice organic shapes bouncing back and forth, not stressing again about the number or the placement. Just have fun, fill the space, let it be your design. Have fun. We'll see you next time on the APQS Quilting channel.